He fed a homeless woman without asking questions. Weeks later, she returned through lawyers. Before we begin, I'd love to know something. Where in the world are you listening from? Tell me in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments what you think about this story when it's over. I really love reading your thoughts. The first thing people noticed about Daniel Pierce was how tired he looked. Not the "I stayed up too late" tired. The kind of tired that lived in the bones, quiet, constant, and heavy enough to change the way a man walked. Daniel was 34, a single dad of 2, and his life ran on a schedule so tight it felt like a rope around his chest. Mornings started before sunrise, with school lunches, missing socks, and the steady pressure of pretending everything was under control. He worked construction during the day, not the clean kind that looked good on social media, but the real kind: dust, concrete, aching knees. After work, he picked up his kids, helped with homework, cooked dinner, and tried to smile when they asked him questions that cut him open. "Are we gonna be okay, Dad?" Daniel always answered the same way. "Yeah," he'd say, voice steady. "We're okay." Even if he didn't fully believe it. After his wife died 2 years ago, sudden illness, fast decline, the kind of pain that didn't make sense, Daniel became 2 people at once. A father who had to keep going, and a man who didn't know where grief ended and survival began. He didn't have time to fall apart. And that was the most dangerous part. Because when you never stop moving, you don't notice how much of yourself you're leaving behind. Money didn't stretch in Daniel's world. It broke. Every week, he laid bills across his kitchen table and played the same brutal game. Which ones could wait without punishing him immediately? Rent, electric, gas, groceries. Sometimes he skipped meals so his kids wouldn't notice the fridge was empty by Thursday. Sometimes he lied. "Not hungry," he'd say. They believed him. Kids always want to believe their parents are stronger than they are. That Friday, Daniel got paid late. Again. He checked his bank app at lunch, hoping the deposit had finally come through. It hadn't. His stomach tightened. It wasn't just stress. It was fear. The kind that makes your hand shake when you reach for your wallet and feel nothing but a few wrinkled bills. Daniel bought the cheapest thing he could at the corner deli, one hot meal special, because it came with extra bread. He planned to split it with his kids later. He always split everything. He tucked the container carefully into his work bag and headed back to the job site. That's when he saw her. She was sitting outside the deli, half hidden beside a newspaper stand, trying to make herself smaller than the world. Her coat was too thin, her shoes worn out, her hair tangled beneath a hat that didn't match the weather. At first, Daniel almost didn't notice her. Not because he didn't care. Because the city trained people not to see. Homelessness became part of the scenery like traffic lights and broken sidewalks. People learned to look past it, not out of cruelty, but out of self-protection. Seeing meant feeling. Feeling meant responsibility. And most people already felt like they were drowning. Daniel would have walked past, like so many others did. But then the woman looked up. Their eyes met. And something in Daniel's chest shifted. Her eyes weren't begging. They were exhausted, like she'd already accepted that no one was coming. Daniel stopped without deciding to. He stood there awkwardly, holding his bag like it might suddenly become heavier. The woman's lips parted slightly, as if she was about to speak, then she didn't. She lowered her gaze again, almost ashamed. Daniel felt a strange heat rise behind his eyes. Not pity. Recognition. Because he knew what it felt like to be invisible. To be the person people avoided because your pain made them uncomfortable. He looked down at his bag. 1 meal. His kids would be waiting. His bills weren't paid. His stomach was already empty. And yet, something inside him wouldn't let him move. Daniel crouched down slowly. "Hey," he said gently. "You hungry?" The woman's throat bobbed as she swallowed. She hesitated, like she didn't trust kindness enough to answer honestly. Then she nodded once. "Yes," she whispered. Daniel opened his bag and pulled out the container. It was still warm. He held it out carefully, as if offering something sacred. I was gonna take it home, he admitted, voice low. But you can have it. The woman stared at the food like it might disappear. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. Then she froze. You got kids? She asked softly, looking at him in a way that felt too sharp to be casual. Daniel blinked. Yeah, 2. She stared a second longer than normal. I can't take this, she said, pushing the container back slightly. Not if they… Daniel shook his head. They'll eat, he said quickly. I promise. It wasn't fully true, but it wasn't fully a lie either. He would make it work. He always did. The woman's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. She took the food with both hands, like it was the first gift she'd received in years. Thank you, she whispered, voice cracking. You don't know what this means. Daniel swallowed hard. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. Daniel stood up and brushed his hands on his jeans. He should have walked away. That's what people did after a good deed leave, before things got complicated. But he didn't. He stayed another second. What's your name? He asked. The woman hesitated. Then, after a beat, she said, Mara. Daniel nodded. I'm Daniel. Mara, he repeated, like committing it to memory. She looked down again and began eating carefully, slow and grateful, like she didn't want to waste even a crumb. Daniel turned to leave, then paused. You got somewhere safe tonight? He asked. Mara's jaw tightened. I'll be fine, she said, too quickly. Daniel didn't push. He knew that tone. It was the tone of someone who had learned that telling the truth didn't help. He nodded once. Okay. Then he walked back toward the job site. But halfway down the sidewalk, he heard her voice behind him. Daniel. He turned. Mara stood up, clutching the container against her chest. You're a good man, she said, voice stronger now. Please don't stop being one. Daniel forced a tired smile. Yeah, he murmured. I'll try. That night, Daniel got home late. His kids, Lily and Noah, were already in pajamas. Lily was 8, sharp-eyed and observant in a way that made Daniel nervous. Noah was 6, still soft around the edges, still believing the world was mostly kind. What did you bring? Noah asked, running to the door. Daniel hesitated. His bag was empty. I forgot to grab food after work, he said carefully. Lily's eyes narrowed. You forgot? She asked. Daniel nodded. Yeah, my bad. Lily didn't look convinced. But she didn't argue. They ate cereal for dinner. Again. Noah didn't complain. Lily didn't either. She just watched Daniel in that quiet way that made him feel like she could see through him. After the kids went to bed, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table with a glass of water. He stared at the unpaid bills. He wondered if he'd made a mistake. Then he pictured Mara's hands shaking, her eyes filled with tears, the way she held food like it was life itself. Daniel closed his eyes. If giving away one meal could make someone feel human again, maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was the first time in a long time he'd done something that wasn't just survival. Weeks passed. Daniel didn't see Mara again. Not at the deli, not on the street corner, not near the newspaper stand. At first, he worried. Then life swallowed him whole again. Work, school pickups, homework, bills, exhaustion. But something about that moment stayed lodged in his mind, like a message the universe had handed him and dared him not to forget. One afternoon, Lily came home from school quieter than usual. Daniel noticed immediately. What's wrong? He asked gently. Lily sat at the table and picked at the edge of her sleeve. Today we learned about people without homes, she said. Daniel's throat tightened. And I told my teacher you would help them. Daniel blinked. You did? Lily nodded, a little nervous. Because you would. The words hit him like a weight, not guilt. Responsibility, the kind that makes you realize your children don't just watch what you do, they become it. Daniel reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Yeah, he said softly. I would. Lily looked relieved. Then she said, quieter. Mom would too. Daniel's eyes burned. He nodded. Yeah, she would. The next Friday, Something unusual happened. Daniel got home from work and found a black car parked near his apartment building. Not a normal black car. A luxury one. Polished. Silent. Expensive enough to make the street look cheaper just by sitting there. 2 men stood beside it. Both wore suits. Sharp. Professional. Out of place. Daniel's stomach tightened. His first thought was ridiculous. I didn't do anything wrong. His second thought came colder. Maybe I did. As Daniel approached, one of the men stepped forward. "Daniel Pierce?" he asked. Daniel stopped. "Yeah, that's me." The man opened a leather folder and nodded politely. "My name is Jonathan Hale," he said. "I'm an attorney." Daniel's heart dropped. "An attorney?" he repeated. The other man, equally serious, stepped beside him. "We've been looking for you," Jonathan added. Daniel's mouth went dry. "For me? Why?" Jonathan hesitated. Like the truth was delicate. "Because a woman named Mara asked us to find you," he said. Daniel froze. The air changed. His skin prickled. "How do you know Mara?" Daniel asked, voice low. Jonathan gave him a look that wasn't judgment. It was something closer to respect. "Sir," he said carefully, "she's not who you think she is." Daniel didn't speak for a moment. His eyes flicked from the attorney's face to the other man's suit, then to the black car behind them. The vehicle didn't look like it belonged in this neighborhood. Nothing about these men belonged here. And the way they said her name? Mara, like it carried weight. "Look," Daniel said carefully, keeping his voice low. "I met her once, outside the deli. She was homeless. I gave her a meal. That's it." The attorney, Jonathan Hale, nodded slowly, as if Daniel's version of the story matched exactly what he expected. "I understand," Jonathan said, "and that's why we're here." The second, man taller, broader shoulders, silent up to this point, finally spoke. "May we come inside?" he asked. His tone was polite, but it wasn't a request that felt optional. Daniel's stomach tightened. He glanced at his apartment door, then back at the street. He didn't want the neighbors watching. He didn't want his kids seeing strangers in suits and thinking something was wrong. "My kids are inside," Daniel said. "If this is some kind of legal—" "It's not trouble," Jonathan interrupted calmly. "I promise you that, but it is important." Daniel hesitated. Then he nodded once. "Okay," he said. 5 minutes. Inside, the air smelled like laundry detergent and macaroni. A child's drawing was taped crookedly to the fridge, stick figures holding hands under a sun with too many rays. Jonathan stepped in like someone walking into a sacred place. He looked around without judgment, just observation. The tall man stayed near the door, as if trained to. Daniel noticed that too. No one dressed like that, stood guard for no reason. Lily appeared first, peeking from the hallway with the caution of a child who had learned to read stress. "Dad," she asked, "who are they?" Daniel forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just people from work," he said quickly. "Go sit with Noah, okay?" Lily's eyes narrowed. She knew when adults lied, but she nodded anyway and disappeared back down the hall. Daniel turned toward the attorneys, voice tense. "Say what you need to say," he whispered. Jonathan placed his leather folder on the small kitchen table and didn't open it right away. Instead, he looked at Daniel like a man trying to choose the gentlest sentence. "Mr. Pierce," Jonathan said, "the woman you fed, her full name is Mara Ellison." Daniel blinked. The name meant nothing. "I don't," Daniel started. Jonathan continued. "She is the founder and majority owner of Ellison Holdings." Daniel stared. "That's not possible," he said, almost laughing. "She was living on the street." Jonathan nodded once. "Yes," he said quietly. She was. Daniel's mind tried to reject it. It reached for logic, for anything stable. "Mara Ellison is... that's the woman who..." Daniel stopped mid-sentence. He had seen her face before. Not at the deli, on billboards, magazine covers at checkout lanes, business news clips playing silently on TVs in bars. A woman praised for building an empire, for being ruthless in negotiations and untouchable in boardrooms. The kind of woman who wouldn't even see someone like Daniel Pierce. Daniel swallowed hard. "You're saying she was here," Daniel whispered. "In my neighborhood. Homeless?" Jonathan opened the folder, sliding a photo across the table. Not a glamorous photo. A security camera still image. Mara, sitting outside the deli, hunched in her thin coat. Daniel's chest tightened. "She asked us not to intervene," Jonathan said. "Not at first." Daniel's brows pulled together. "Why?" he demanded. Jonathan hesitated again, then said, "Because she was trying to disappear." Daniel stared at the photograph like it might rearrange itself into something easier. The tall man finally moved from the door and stood behind Jonathan, silent again. Daniel realized he wasn't just a lawyer. He was security, protection, for her, which meant she was still important enough to be guarded. Even after living on the street, Daniel's voice came out sharper than he intended. "Why are you telling me this?" Jonathan's eyes didn't flinch. "Because," he said, "Mara is alive. She's safe, but she's in the hospital." Daniel froze. "In the hospital?" he repeated. Jonathan nodded. "She collapsed 2 days ago." Daniel exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Is she okay?" Jonathan's expression tightened. "She will recover, but she asked one thing when she woke up." Daniel's skin prickled. "What?" he asked. Jonathan met his eyes directly. "She asked for you." Silence swallowed the room. Daniel felt like he was sinking. "Me?" he whispered. "Why the hell would she ask for me?" Jonathan's voice softened just slightly. "Because you fed her," he said. "And you didn't ask for anything in return." Daniel shook his head like the motion could clear his brain. I gave her food," he said. "That's all." Jonathan leaned forward. "To you, that was just food," he said. To her, it was the first moment in years she felt like a human being again. Daniel stared down at the table, heart pounding. He thought about the way Mara's hands had trembled, the way she'd tried to refuse the meal when she heard he had kids, the way she'd said, "Please don't stop being a good man." Daniel's throat tightened. Why was she even there? Daniel asked quietly. Why would someone like her end up on the street? Jonathan sat back. "She didn't end up there," he said. "She chose it." Daniel blinked. "Chose it?" Jonathan nodded. "She was testing something," he said. "In herself, in the world, in people." Daniel's stomach twisted. "That's insane." "Maybe," Jonathan admitted. "But pain makes people do strange things." Daniel turned away, pacing half a step, then back. "You're not making sense," he said. "What does she want from me?" Jonathan flipped to a page in the folder. "She asked you to come to the hospital," he said, "to speak with her, and to consider something." Daniel's heart sank again. "There it is," he muttered. "I knew this couldn't be simple." Jonathan's expression stayed calm. "It's not money," he said quickly. "It's not a lawsuit. It's not a trap." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then what is it?" Jonathan paused, then said, "It's a request." Daniel stared at him suspiciously. "A request from a billionaire to a broke single dad?" Daniel said bitterly. "That sounds like a joke." Jonathan didn't smile. "It isn't," he said. He slid another paper across the table. Daniel looked down. It wasn't a contract. It was a letter. Handwritten. The handwriting was shakier than Daniel expected. It began with 2 words. "Daniel Pierce." Daniel's chest tightened. He read in silence. "I don't know if you remember me. I don't even know if you'll believe what I'm about to say. But you fed me when you didn't have to. And you didn't do it because you recognized me. You did it because you saw me. I have spent my entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Money, power, attention. You were the first person in years who gave me something I didn't earn. Kindness. I need to meet you again. Not because I owe you, but because I'm afraid of what it means if I never do. Please come. Mara." Daniel's vision blurred slightly. Not because he was sentimental, because he understood that kind of loneliness. He'd felt it in different ways: grief, exhaustion, responsibility. But loneliness was loneliness. It didn't care if you had billions or pennies. Daniel lowered the letter slowly. His hands were tight around the paper. His first instinct was to say no. No to complications. No to rich people's chaos. No to being pulled into a world he didn't belong in. But his second instinct was quieter and older. The instinct that made him feed her in the first place. "You said she collapsed 2 days ago," Daniel murmured. Jonathan nodded. "So she was out there for weeks?" Daniel asked. "Hungry? Cold? Alone?" Jonathan's expression darkened. "Yes." Daniel's jaw clenched. "And nobody recognized her?" "Some did," Jonathan admitted. "Most didn't believe it. And she didn't make it easy." Daniel exhaled sharply. "She was trying to disappear," he repeated, tasting the sadness in the words. Jonathan nodded. The tall man at the door finally spoke again. "She wasn't just disappearing," he said. "She was escaping." Daniel turned toward him. "From what?" Daniel asked. The tall man's eyes were steady. "From her own life," he replied. Daniel rubbed his face, exhausted. "What happens if I don't go?" he asked quietly. Jonathan answered immediately. "She'll still recover," he said. "She'll still have everything she had before." Daniel nodded. "But," Jonathan added, voice lower, "I don't think she'll ever forgive herself for what she learned out there." Daniel stared. "What did she learn?" he asked. Jonathan didn't answer right away. Then he said that kindness is rare, and that she had forgotten what it feels like. Daniel looked down at the letter again. He thought about his kids. He thought about the cereal dinners, the bills, the weight of being the only one holding the roof up. He thought about the fact that even with all that, he'd still stopped. He'd still given. It hadn't made him richer, but it had made him human. Daniel folded the letter carefully. "When?" he asked. Jonathan's shoulders loosened slightly. "Tonight," he said. "If possible." Daniel swallowed. "Okay," he whispered. "Tonight." 2 hours later, Daniel stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of the only clean button-down he owned. Lily hovered near the doorway. "You're going somewhere?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "Yeah. Work?" she asked, skeptical. Daniel hesitated, then told the truth. "No," he said. "I'm helping someone." End quote. Lily's eyes narrowed. "Like the homeless lady?" she asked. Daniel froze. "How do you know about that?" he asked. Lily shrugged. "I saw you come home with no food," she said simply. "And you're a terrible liar." Daniel blinked, then laughed softly despite himself. Lily stepped closer. "Dad," she said seriously, "are we okay?" Daniel's throat tightened. He crouched to her level. "We are," he promised. "Always." She looked into his eyes, like she could see his fear. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said. "Be a good man." Daniel's breath caught. The same words. From his daughter, from Mara. Daniel swallowed hard and kissed Lily's forehead. "I'll try," he whispered. The hospital was brighter than Daniel expected. Too clean, too expensive looking. Jonathan met him at the entrance and led him through corridors that smelled like antiseptic and quiet money. They stopped at a private room. A guard stood outside. Daniel's stomach turned. Jonathan opened the door gently. Inside, Mara sat upright in bed. Her hair was brushed now, her skin cleaner, but she looked fragile. Not weak, fragile, like someone who had broken internally and was still holding the pieces together with pure will. Her eyes lifted, and when she saw Daniel, her face shifted into something Daniel couldn't name. Relief, shame, gratitude, all at once. "Daniel," she whispered. Daniel stepped inside slowly. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It's me." Mara's eyes filled instantly. She looked away for a second, embarrassed by the emotion. Then she looked back at him, voice shaking. "I didn't think you'd come." Daniel swallowed. "I didn't think your lawyers would ever knock on my door," he replied. A soft, broken laugh escaped her. "Fair," she admitted. Daniel stepped closer. He looked at her carefully. You were really out there, he said. All that time.
Mara nodded once.
I was, she whispered. And I deserved it. Daniel's jaw tightened. No, he said firmly. Nobody deserves that. Mara stared at him like the sentence hurt more than the cold ever did. People like me, she whispered. We spend our whole lives believing we earned everything, that we're untouchable, that we can control the world. Her voice cracked. Out there, I couldn't control anything. I couldn't control anything. Daniel didn't speak. He just listened. Mara swallowed hard and forced the next words out. You fed me when you had nothing, she said. And you didn't even look at me like I was disgusting. You looked at me like I was real. Daniel felt his chest tighten. I didn't do anything special, he said quietly. Mara shook her head slowly. Yes, you did, she whispered. You reminded me what kind of world I've been living in, and what kind of person I've become. She inhaled shakily. And now, she said, I have to do something about it. Daniel's brow furrowed. Do what? He asked. Mara looked directly into his eyes. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of something irreversible. I want to change your life, she said. Daniel froze. No, he said instantly. I'm not here for money. Mara nodded gently. I know, she whispered. That's why it has to be you. Daniel stared at her, confusion and fear mixing. What are you talking about? He asked. Mara swallowed, then said the sentence that would split Daniel's life into before and after. Because I didn't just meet you out there. Daniel's heart pounded. Mara's eyes shimmered. I recognized you. Daniel didn't answer right away. He just stared at Mara, the billionaire woman sitting in a private hospital room with guarded doors and polished floors, someone the world would describe as untouchable. Yet her eyes didn't look untouchable right now. They looked terrified. Recognized me? Daniel repeated slowly. Mara nodded, her throat moving as she swallowed back emotion. Yes, she whispered. Not at first. Not right away. But then you said something, and I knew. Daniel's heartbeat felt louder in his ears. What did I say? He asked, voice tight. Mara glanced down at her hands. Her fingers were pale against the white hospital blanket. You said your kids would eat, she murmured, even though your eyes told me you weren't sure. Daniel stiffened. That's not he started. But he stopped. Because it was true. Mara looked up again, gaze sharper now. That's what your father used to say, she said. When we were broke. Daniel's blood ran cold. He took one step closer to the bed. My father? He whispered. Mara's eyes filled again. I knew your dad, she said softly. Daniel, I knew him very well. The air in the room changed. Daniel felt it like pressure, like weather. That name Dad hit him in a place he didn't let many things reach. His father had died when Daniel was 19. Hard-working, stubborn, proud. A man who carried the world on his back and pretended it wasn't heavy. Daniel had spent years trying to become that kind of man, and failing in quiet ways. How do you know my father? Daniel asked again, slower, like speaking too fast might break something. Mara inhalet shakily. Because he saved my life, she whispered. Daniel's body went still. Outside the room, the hospital moved. Machines hummed. Nurses walked past. But inside, the world narrowed to those 7 words. He saved my life. Daniel's voice was barely audible. From what? Mara swallowed. From becoming the person I became, she admitted. Daniel frowned, confused and unsettled. That doesn't make sense, he said. Mara nodded slowly. It didn't make sense to me either, until I was sleeping on pavement. She looked toward the window, where city lights glittered like they didn't care who suffered beneath them. When I was 16, Mara began, I lived in a house with no peace. Daniel didn't interrupt. He had learned to listen. Being a single dad teaches you that some truths only come out when you don't rush them. My father was powerful, she said. But he wasn't kind. He believed fear was discipline. Control was love. Her voice tightened. I learned early that if I wanted to survive, I had to become colder than him. Daniel watched her carefully. That wasn't a billionaire talking. That was a wounded girl. One night I ran away, Mara continued. I didn't have a plan. I just had desperation. She paused, eyes glassy. I ended up at a diner on the edge of town. I was hungry, dirty, and trying not to look like I was falling apart. Daniel's stomach twisted. He could picture it too clearly. That diner, Mara said quietly, was where your father worked nights. Daniel blinked hard. My dad worked 2 jobs, Daniel said automatically. Construction during the day, diner at night. Mara nodded. He was behind the counter, she said. He looked exhausted, the kind of exhausted that only good men carry. Daniel didn't know how to breathe. Mara continued. I didn't ask him for food. I didn't ask him for help. I didn't want anyone to see me. Her voice broke. But your father, he saw me anyway. Daniel swallowed hard. Mara's eyes locked on his. He put a plate of food in front of me, she whispered. And he said, eat first. Then you can figure out the rest. Daniel's throat tightened like it was closing. Mara's voice trembled as she forced the next words out. And when I tried to refuse, he said the exact same thing you said. She paused, blinking away tears. My family will eat. Don't worry about that. Daniel stood there like someone had punched the air from his lungs. He saw his father's hands in his mind, rough, cracked, warm. He could hear his father's voice, calm, certain. Daniel didn't realize he was shaking until he looked down and saw his fingers trembling. That was you, Mara whispered. You sounded like him. Daniel's chest felt like it was splitting open. You're telling me, he said slowly, my father fed you when you were a teenager. Mara nodded. I lived on the street for a while after that, she admitted. Not like recently. Different city. Different era. But I was still lost. Daniel's eyes burned. And my father helped you. He did, Mara said. More than once. Daniel took a step back, overwhelmed. His father had never told him. Not once. But suddenly, Daniel realized something else, something that hurt even more. Maybe his father hadn't told him because he hadn't thought it was special. Maybe it was just who he was. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face, voice rough. Then why didn't you help him? He demanded suddenly. If you became who you became, powerful, wealthy, why didn't you help him? Mara flinched. The question landed exactly where it should have. I tried, she whispered. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What do you mean you tried? Mara looked down. Years later, she said, when I started gaining power, I searched for him. I wanted to repay him. Daniel's heart pounded. And? He asked. Mara's voice cracked. I was too late. Daniel felt the room tilt. My dad died 2 years after I graduated high school, Daniel said quietly. Heart attack. Mara nodded. I know. Daniel froze again. You know? He repeated. I knew the moment it happened, Mara whispered. I had someone looking for him. I got his name. I got his town. Her eyes filled, guilt heavy, and then I got the report, and all I could think was, she stopped, breath breaking. I thought, of course the world took him. Daniel's jaw clenched. So you disappeared, he said, suddenly understanding. That's why you went to the street, because you wanted to punish yourself. Mara shut her eyes. Yes, she whispered, and because I needed to know something. Daniel stared at her, his voice low and sharp. Know what? Mara opened her eyes. Her gaze was steady now, not powerful, honest. I needed to know if kindness still existed, she said. If I had built my entire life on the wrong belief that people are selfish unless forced to do good. Daniel didn't speak. Mara continued. I needed to know if your father was rare or if the world still had men like him. She paused. And then I met you. Daniel's throat tightened. So all that time, he whispered, you were out there watching people walk past you. Mara's eyes softened. I wasn't watching, she corrected gently. I was learning. Daniel felt anger rise. Not at her, not fully. At the world, at the fact that kindness was treated like a miracle instead of a normal thing. "At the deli," Daniel said, voice rough, "you asked if I had kids." Mara nodded. "I wasn't testing you," she said. "I was trying to protect them." Daniel's stomach dropped. "You were trying to protect my kids?" he repeated, confused. Mara's voice was quiet. "Because I know what it's like," she said, "when a parent gives away their last meal." Daniel's eyes burned again. He finally looked away, blinking hard, refusing to let tears fall in front of her. His whole life, he had carried his father's memory like a weight. Now he was learning it had rippled beyond his own family. His father hadn't just been a father. He had been a lifeline to a stranger. Daniel exhaled slowly. "What do you want from me?" he asked again. But this time the question was different. Less suspicious. More open. Mara straightened slightly. "I don't want your gratitude," she said immediately. "I don't want a headline. I don't want to be forgiven for disappearing." Daniel said nothing. Mara's voice became steadier. "I want to do what I should have done years ago," she said. Daniel's eyes returned to her face. "And what is that?" he asked. Mara swallowed. "I want to honor your father," she whispered, "by helping the family he left behind." Daniel's chest tightened. "No," he said immediately, almost instinctively. "I don't want charity." Mara nodded gently, like she expected that. "It's not charity," she said. "It's repayment." Daniel clenched his jaw. "You don't owe me," he said. Mara's eyes didn't flinch. "Yes," she replied softly, "I do." Silence stretched between them. Then Mara reached to the side table and took a small envelope. She held it out. Daniel stared at it like it might explode. "What is that?" he asked. Mara's voice dropped. "It's the reason my lawyers found you," she said. "And the reason I couldn't wait any longer." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Why?" he asked. Mara's eyes filled again, but her voice stayed steady. "Because I don't have much time to fix what I broke," she whispered. Daniel froze. The words sank slowly into his chest. "Not much time." "What do you mean?" he asked, voice suddenly hoarse. Mara looked away toward the window again, swallowing hard. "Daniel," she whispered, "I didn't collapse because I was tired." Daniel's blood ran cold. Mara turned back to him, and with one sentence, she pulled him into the true heart of the story. "I collapsed because I'm sick." Daniel didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at Mara like his brain couldn't decide what to believe first, the billionaire part, the homeless part, the she recognized you part, or the last sentence, "I'm sick." The air felt heavier, like the room itself had absorbed the weight of the words. Daniel swallowed, his throat dry. "Sick how?" he finally asked. Mara's eyes flickered, not with fear of dying, but with fear of being seen as weak. She exhaled slowly. "Autoimmune," she said. "It's been getting worse. My doctors warned me years ago that stress would accelerate it." Daniel stared at her. "So you did this?" He gestured vaguely, unable to find the right words. "You went out there while you were sick?" Mara nodded once. "Yes," she whispered. "I wanted to feel something real before my body decided it was done with me." Daniel's stomach turned. "That's insane," he said again. But this time, it wasn't judgment. It was disbelief, mixed with something like grief. Mara's lips pressed together. "I built my whole life around control," she said softly. "I've controlled markets, people, outcomes, but I can't control this." She tapped her chest gently. "And when you can't control your own body, you start wondering what was worth it." Daniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to be angry at her for what she did, for disappearing, for choosing the streets like it was a lesson, but he couldn't ignore the raw truth in her eyes. Whatever she'd been, Mara wasn't playing a game anymore. She was racing time. Daniel glanced at the envelope in her hand. "What is that?" he asked again. Mara held it out. Daniel didn't take it immediately. "I'm not here for money," he said, voice firm. "I know," Mara replied. "That's why it matters." Daniel took the envelope slowly, like the paper might burn him. Inside was a single card, not a check, not a contract, a handwritten address and a time, and beneath it, one sentence. Bring your kids. Daniel's heart clenched. What is this? He asked. Mara's voice softened. A dinner, she said. At my estate. Tomorrow night. Daniel's brows pulled together. Why? Mara blinked slowly. Because, she whispered, I want to look your children in the eyes and tell them the truth. Daniel's throat tightened. What truth? Mara swallowed hard, then said it plainly. That their father's kindness reached further than he will ever understand, and that their grandfather's kindness saved a girl who became a woman she doesn't even recognize anymore. Daniel stared at her, breath shallow. He didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to walk out and slam the door on this entire world. But another part, the part that looked like his father, refused to abandon someone who finally stopped pretending. Daniel shook his head slightly. You don't need to do all this, he said. You don't owe me anything. My dad helped you. I helped you. That's it. Mara's eyes shimmered. No, she whispered. That's not it. Daniel frowned. Mara's voice broke. I spent my entire life surrounded by people who wanted to take from me, she said. And when I finally met a man who gave without taking, I realized something horrible. Daniel didn't move. I realized I don't have anyone like that in my life, she said. No one who would love me if I wasn't useful. Her voice shook harder now. I built a kingdom, she whispered, and it has no family inside it. Daniel's chest tightened. In that moment, he saw her clearly. Not as a billionaire, not as a homeless woman, as a human being who had been starving for something money couldn't buy. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked away, staring at the hospital wall, fighting something inside himself. Because if he said yes to her dinner, it wasn't just a dinner. It was a doorway into a life that could change everything. And Daniel had spent years learning how to survive without hope, because hope felt dangerous. It made disappointment sharper. He turned back to Mara. What are you really trying to do? He asked. Mara's gaze stayed steady. I'm trying to do one good thing that can't be faked, she said. One thing no one can take credit for. Daniel swallowed. And what is that? Mara's voice dropped. I want to make sure your children never grow up feeling the way you do, she said gently. Daniel froze. His eyes narrowed. What does that mean? He asked quietly. Mara didn't flinch. It means, she whispered, I can see the exhaustion in you. The way you carry everything alone. The way you're trying not to fall apart because your kids need you standing. Daniel's throat tightened. He hated that she was right. He hated that she saw him. Because being seen meant being vulnerable. And Daniel had no space for vulnerability. Mara's voice softened even more. You reminded me of your father, she said. Not because you gave me food. Daniel swallowed. Because you gave when it hurt. Daniel stared at the card again. Bring your kids, he read quietly. He looked up. Why do you want them there? Mara inhalet shakily. Because I'm not just trying to help you, she said. I'm trying to show them something. Daniel's voice turned cautious. What? Mara answered with a whisper. That kindness comes back. Daniel exhaled, almost bitterly. Not always. Mara nodded. I know, she said. That's why it matters when it does. The next day, Daniel didn't tell his kids everything. He simply said they were going to dinner somewhere special. Lily immediately suspected something. Are we in trouble? She asked in the car. Daniel glanced at her in the mirror. No, he said. Not trouble. Noah bounced in his seat. Are we gonna eat real food? Daniel smiled softly. Yeah, buddy, he said. Real food. Lily stared out the window for a moment, then spoke quietly. Is it because of the lady you helped? Daniel's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Yeah, he admitted. It's because of her. Lily's voice was careful. Is she okay? Daniel hesitated. I don't know yet, he said honestly. But we're going to see. Lily nodded like she understood something bigger than her age. Noah whispered, almost to himself. Mom would have helped her too. Daniel's throat tightened. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Mara's estate didn't look real. Gates taller than Daniel's building. A driveway that curved like a road through a park. Lights soft and warm like someone had designed the night itself. Noah pressed his face to the window. Dad, this is like a castle, he whispered. Daniel's stomach churned. He felt out of place, like a man who had accidentally walked into someone else's world. A guard opened the door before they could knock. Inside, everything was quiet and beautiful, but not cold. It felt lived in, like Mara had tried to make it warm, even if she didn't know how. Mara waited in the main room. She wasn't in a hospital gown anymore. She wore a simple sweater, her hair down, her face still pale but softer. When she saw the kids, she froze. Her eyes filled instantly. Lily held Daniel's hand tightly. Noah looked around, amazed. Mara stepped forward slowly, as if afraid a sudden movement might break something. Hi, she said gently. You must be Lily. And Noah. Lily blinked. How do you know our names? Mara smiled faintly. Your dad told me, she said. When he fed me. Noah tilted his head. You were hungry? Mara's throat bobbed as she swallowed. Yes, she whispered. Very. Lily's face hardened slightly. Why didn't you just buy food? She asked bluntly. Kids don't fear uncomfortable questions. Daniel's heart raced, but Mara didn't flinch. Because I wanted to know what it feels like when people don't see you, Mara said softly. And I learned something important. Lily's eyes narrowed. What? Mara looked at Daniel first, like asking permission. Then she looked back at Lily. I learned your father is a good man, she said. Daniel's throat tightened. Noah smiled proudly.
He is.
Mara's eyes crinkled. Yes, she whispered. He is. Dinner wasn't extravagant the way Daniel expected. It was simple, comfort food, warm bread, soup, chicken, vegetables, dessert that made Noah's eyes widen like the world was finally fair. Lily ate quietly, but kept watching Mara. Daniel watched too, not as a man impressed by wealth, as a man trying to understand why fate had dragged this woman into his life. After dinner, Mara asked if she could speak to Daniel alone. Daniel followed her into a quiet room, lined with books. Mara didn't sit right away. She stood by the window, hands clasped, like she was holding herself together. Thank you, she said quietly. Daniel exhaled. For what? For bringing them, Mara whispered. For letting them see me as human. Daniel frowned. Why is that important to you? Mara turned back to him. Because, she said, voice shaking, I'm about to do something that will make people call me crazy. Daniel's chest tightened. What? Mara stepped forward slightly. I'm creating a trust for your children, she said. Daniel froze. No, he said immediately. Absolutely not. Mara didn't argue. She simply nodded, like she expected the reaction. I knew you'd say that, she whispered. Daniel's jaw clenched. I'm serious. I'm not taking your money. Mara lifted her hand. Then don't take it, she said softly. Daniel blinked. What? Mara's eyes glistened. Let it be theirs, she whispered. Not yours, not mine. Your father's kindness turned into this moment. Let your kids be the ones who benefit. Daniel shook his head hard. That's not fair, he said, voice cracking. My kids didn't earn that. Mara stepped closer, voice gentler. Daniel, neither did I, she whispered. The sentence hit like a punch. Daniel's breath caught. Mara continued, trembling now. I didn't earn your father's kindness, she said. I didn't earn your kindness. She looked down for a second, but it saved me anyway. Daniel stared at her. His chest hurt. Because she was right. Kindness was never about earning. It was about choosing. Daniel's voice was rough. What do you want from us? He asked. Really? Mara's eyes met his. Her voice cracked. "I want you to promise me something," she whispered. Daniel swallowed. "What?" Mara took a shaky breath. "If I don't get better," she said quietly, "I don't want to leave this world knowing I only built a company." Daniel's throat tightened. "I want to leave something human behind," she whispered. Daniel stood still, torn in half by the moment. Mara continued, "Not a donation with my name on it, not a building, not a headline." She looked toward the room where his kids were laughing. "I want to leave behind a story," she whispered. "A story where kindness came back." Daniel's eyes burned. He looked away quickly, because he couldn't afford to cry here. But his voice came out soft when he spoke again. "You're scared," he said. Mara nodded, tears falling now. "Yes," she whispered. "I am." Daniel exhaled slowly. He didn't know how to fix her life, but he knew how to do one thing. He stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough to make her feel less alone. "You're not alone tonight," he said. Mara closed her eyes, like those words were the first real shelter she'd felt in years. When Daniel walked back into the dining room, Lily was waiting. She looked serious. "Dad," she said quietly, "she's sad." Daniel nodded. "She is." Lily hesitated. "Is she nice?" Daniel looked at Mara, pale but smiling softly at Noah. "She's learning," Daniel said. Lily nodded slowly. Then she did something that made Daniel's heart stop. She walked up to Mara and hugged her. Not a polite hug, a real one. Mara froze, shocked. Then she wrapped her arms around Lily carefully, like she didn't trust herself not to break. Lily whispered something too quiet for anyone else to hear. But Daniel saw Mara's face shift. Her eyes squeezed shut, and she started crying. Noah ran over and hugged her too. Daniel stood there, chest tight, watching his children teach a billionaire something the world never had. How to be held without being wanted for anything. Later, as they prepared to leave, Mara walked them to the door. She crouched to Noah's level. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. Noah smiled. "My dad fed you." Mara nodded, eyes wet. "Yes, he did." Noah thought for a second. Then he said, "So now you fed us." Mara laughed softly through tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Now I fed you." Lily looked at Mara seriously. "Are you going to be okay?" she asked. Mara hesitated. Daniel's heart pounded. Then Mara smiled gently. "I'm going to try," she whispered. Lily nodded once, satisfied with honesty. Daniel reached for the door handle, then paused. He looked at Mara. "You were right," Daniel said quietly. Mara blinked. "About what?" Daniel's voice was low, steady. "Kindness comes back," he said. Mara's lips trembled. "Yes," she whispered. "It does." Daniel nodded once. Then he added, softer, "Not always in money." Mara looked up at him. Daniel continued, "Sometimes it comes back as a moment that makes you feel human again." Mara's eyes filled again. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "Thank my dad." Mara nodded, tears falling freely now. "I will," she whispered. "Every day." That night, back in their apartment, Noah fell asleep instantly. Lily stayed awake a little longer. She sat at the table while Daniel washed dishes. "Dad," she said quietly, "are we rich now?" Daniel turned off the water and looked at her. He smiled tiredly. "I don't know," he admitted. Lily frowned. "But she's rich." Daniel nodded. Lily's voice was small. "Will she help us?" Daniel hesitated. Then he answered the truth. "Yes," he said softly. "I think she will." Lily nodded slowly. Then she asked the question that mattered most. "Why?" Daniel walked over and sat across from her. "Because your grandpa helped her," he said. "When he didn't have to." Lily's eyes widened. "Grandpa did?" Daniel nodded. "And because," Daniel added, voice quieter now, "sometimes doing the right thing comes back around." Lily stared at him for a long moment. Then she whispered, So we should always help people? Daniel swallowed, his eyes burning. Not because you'll get something back, he said softly. Lily tilted her head. Then why? Daniel reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Because it's who we are, he whispered. Lily nodded, like she understood. Then she stood up and hugged him. Daniel held her carefully, feeling the weight of the world soften slightly. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Not from a bank, not from a lawyer. A simple envelope, addressed in neat handwriting. Inside was a note. Daniel, I started a foundation in your father's name, not for publicity, for the people the world walks past, the ones who are hungry, tired, and unseen. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure kindness is not rare. Thank you for reminding me what matters. Mara. At the bottom, one final line. Tell Lily and Noah I'm still trying. Daniel folded the letter slowly. He didn't know what would happen to Mara. He didn't know how much time she had left. But he knew one thing for sure. His father's kindness didn't die with him. It came back. Through Daniel, through his kids, through a woman who had everything, and finally learned what she was missing. Daniel looked out the window at the city. People rushing, people surviving, people disappearing, and he whispered the quiet truth that carried the whole story. Kindness doesn't always change the world. He looked toward his kids sleeping in the next room. But it can change someone's.